I am Dr. Sonal Jain from Department of Anthropology, University of Delhi. In this series of forensic science lecture, today we are going to discuss about impression evidences. Now the evidence is anything which is found on the crime scene and can be collected and analyzed by the forensic scientist in the forensic science lab for the individuality and unique impressions to find an individual. There could be any impression evidences which can be uniquely collected and analyzed. The impression evidences, if we go by the definition, can be defined as any object or materials that have retained the characteristic of other objects through direct contact. Impressions are created when one object is pressed against another material with enough force to leave an impression of that particular object. One of the major evidences when we talk about in the category of impression evidences are the footwear evidences or the shoe evidences. The footwear or shoe evidence, when it comes in contact, our shoe comes in contact with any surface, it leaves an impression. Depending upon what kind of surface the object or the subject has made the contact with, so the impression evidence differs accordingly. For example, if we talk about the shoe, if it comes in contact with the soft mud, the impression which is left in the mud would be a 3D impression, because the softer mud, when it comes in contact with the shoe which a person is wearing and the shoe is bearing the weight of the person, that shoe leaves a 3D impression in the mud. But the same shoe, when it comes or goes on a hard surface, it leaves a soft impression. So a soft impression is found on the hard surfaces and a 3D type of impression is found on the soft surfaces. Similarly, other impression evidences when we talk about are the tire impressions or the bite marks or the tool marks. The tool marks could be any marks which are left maybe in the cases of burglary or in the cases of hit and run cases. We have to look for what kind of case is there and what kind of impression evidences can be found in such cases. The shoe or footwear impression is a very common evidence which can be found at most of the crime scenes, because a crime which is committed by a person, the person must have reached at the crime scene using any vehicle and by walking. So whenever the shoe comes in contact with any grass, any soft mud, any hard surface, it is bound to leave the impression. It is the knowledge of the forensic investigator how he can look for the particular impression evidences, how to collect meticulously those evidences from the crime scene. So it would be easier for a forensic scientist to analyze those evidences at the forensic science lab. Shoe prints, tool marks, tire tracks, bite marks, marks on a fired bullet, these are the several examples of the impression evidences. Impressions may be found in or on many different types of materials. The quality of the impression depends on the object making the impression and the surface conditions, such as how hard or soft it is and what type of material it is. Like I said, depending upon if a shoe is making an impression on a soil, then that impression would be really very clear. It could be a 3D impression. But if that impression is being made on a concrete, then that would be a 2D impression. Depending upon the quality of impression, as we say, it depends upon the hardness and softness of the both the material on which the impression is being made and the object which is making the impression. Now for collecting these investigators analyze the impression evidence to find unique characteristics to link shoes, tires, tools and other objects found in a suspect's possession to evidence at a crime scene. So let's talk about one simple thing. If a criminal is wearing a shoe size of a 10, the shoe size is similar for one person, and it could be there are many person in the world, in a city, in a country, and at that particular place where a crime is being committed, who are wearing a size 10, but it is different that those persons are wearing different brands of shoes. There could be something common that 2 or 3 or 4 persons might wearing same brand of shoes in the same color in the same size. Then what makes it different? There could be certain individual markings which we have to look for. We have to look for those individual markings in each impression evidence. Whether it is a footwear evidence, it is a tire impression mark, it is a tool mark, we have to look for the individuality which comes with the wear and tear and with time. Like with wear and tear, there are certain nicks and cuts which are being made on the shoes or on the tools or certain tires. We have to look for those impression evidences, and we have to look, analyze for those individual characteristics to identify and individualize the person or the tool or the firearm, depending upon on what case it is there. So the collection of impression evidence can be accomplished using several methods. 2D, this type of impression is documented using photography. Some impressions may be dusted with fingerprint powder to be photographed or lifted with tape. This may also be collected using an electrostatic dust lifting process. These are good for where the impressions are 2D in nature. But for the evidences which are 3D in nature, they can be documented using photography as well as by casting of the footprint, which involves using dental stone or a similar substance to preserve the dimensional characteristics of the print. So, in the impression evidences which we are talking about, let's talk about the first, shoe print evidence. Investigators can analyze a shoe print to determine its class or the type and the brand of shoe. They will also look for individual characteristics such as wear patterns and specific damages or defects. These are known as the individual characteristics which will differentiate the same brand of shoe, the same size of shoe which are being worn by two different persons. Databases of shoe prints are available for investigators to help them determine the brand of a shoe to provide leads for a case. Depending upon the quality of the impression, investigators may be able to determine a person's speed, walking versus running, as well as estimate the size of a person based on the impression's depth. So, whenever we have footwear impression, we can look about the depth, how much depth is present in the footwear impression. So, with how much pressure the person has put his feet on that particular ground, we can estimate whether the person was walking with a slower speed or the person was running with a higher speed, depending upon the pressure which was being made by the person's shoe on the surface. So, what features shall we analyze in such impression evidences? The tread patterns, size and depth which is on the back of the shoe, wear patterns which are being caused by the way a person walks. The tread pattern, size and depth are common for a shoe from a same brand, but the wear patterns caused by the way a person walks is different for different persons. The material defects or damage, various nicks, cuts, etc. Other trace materials such as soil, tar, rock and paint that would indicate where the person has been, from where he is coming, and before coming to the place, to all places where he has been to. in various cases we have identified that there is different soil which was being found on the shoe of the person, and it matches to the soil where the person lives. So it is easy to track the person from where he has come from. So as we were discussing, there is a STAMP database where they have the full database of different footwears. Various companies have put their data in this database, which talks about if we input some information that this footprint matches with which brand, then the information can come out that this particular footwear belongs to Nike or Adidas, which is a size 10 and which was launched in this year in this cities. So all those availability can help us in shortlisting the suspect, because depending upon what type of shoe he is wearing, if any person is wearing a different shoe which is not available, much available, then it is very easy to identify such persons. So depending upon, as we spoke about the how is the surface, whether the surface is soft or hard, the print could be 2D or 3D. A very soft surface like a mud leaves a very good impression, where all the nicks, cuts, wear, tears are visible on the footprint impression, and it is easy to identify on a person on the basis of that. Now how the footwear evidence is important in forensics. The physical contact between footwear and a viable surface leaves a transfer of class and individual characteristics which can be used in identification of the possible suspects. So whenever a footwear evidence or a shoe evidence is left on the crime scene, the class and individual characteristics which are being transferred, the evidence can be collected and can be sent to the forensic science lab for the analysis. There are the steps for footwear evidence collection. Firstly, we should detect and recover the footwear evidence from scene of crime. The first thing we should keep in mind is about the footwear evidences. If they are found in mud, they are mostly found in an open area, and those can be destroyed by the public who is reaching at the scene of crime. The public might include the forensic investigating officers, the relatives of the person who was involved in the crime, the victim, or the media or the family members, etc. So to save our evidence from such persons, we have to take care of first detection and recovery of those footwear evidences. Sometimes in cases when it is not possible to collect the evidence then and thereby, those evidences should be covered using either a bucket or some other thing, so that people should not step over that evidence and should not destroy that evidence. Enhancement of evidence is very necessary. Producing known impressions of shoes being examined and comparing the crime scene impressions with the footwear. So for the 2D examination, photography is done, and if the 2D print has some dust, then using the electrostatic apparatus we can collect that footprint. In the 3D, where there is a depth in the evidence, we can use plaster of Paris for the collection of that evidences. Similarly, for the comparison, we have to take evidence from the person or the suspect wearing the same footwears and in different positions, while walking, while running, while walking slow, while standing, while jumping, etc. So that proper nicks and cuts should come in our collection evidences which we are taking from the suspect. So as we discussed about the 3D impressions as well as 2D impressions, 3D impressions which remain after a shoe permanently deforms the surface, and 2D based on the tile, wood flooring, etc. Some 3D impressions are almost called as visible evidences, but 2D impressions sometimes they are visible depending upon If there is something attached with the back of the shoe, then the evidence is visible, but mostly they are latent evidence and the forensic investigators have to look for such evidences. Now, what information we can get from the footwear impressions? Firstly, we can know about the identification of footwear, the shoe size, what shoe size the person is wearing. We can also, using the stamp database, we can know which brand of this shoe the person is wearing. So after identification of the footwear, we can eliminate the other footwears, that this person is a size 10. So other persons who are size 9, size 8, size 11 can be eliminated from this search. Participation of suspect in crime. Sometimes there can be 3 or 4 different types of shoe sizes and shoe prints which are found at the crime scene. So we can make an assumption that 4 or 5 or 6 people were involved in this crime. We'll look for the impression, what is the location of the impressions, which will give us an idea of the entry point as well as exit point, that from this area the person has entered, from this area the person has exited the crime scene. So it will give us a whole idea of the location, how the crime might have committed, which will help us in making the proper chain of custody, that the shoe impressions are found from the front door and they are also found at the back door. So the persons have come from, entered from this area and they have exited from this area. So the number of the persons, the location of the person, identification of the footwears, confirmation or rebuttal of alibis, and determination of the shoe brand. So apart from all these informations, we can, using this footwear impression information, we can link suspect to the crime scene, we can determine their shoe size, we can know how many number of perpetrators were included in the crime, association with the other evidences. For example, if there is some different kind of mud, different kind of paint, coal, tar is being attached at the back of the shoe, which comes in the evidence, we can say the person has come from an area where there was fresh tar. That means the person has walked at some place where the new road was being formed. So we can relate it with other evidence. And most important is gait characteristic. We can know with the size of the shoe, we can estimate the height of the person, we can talk about the walking pattern of a person. The walking pattern of a person, of different persons, are also very individualistic. We can comment on the person, the way he walks, the way he is walking, the gait characteristic of that person, and then which can lead to the tracking of that person. For the location and recovery of the footwear impressions, it is very critical that proper techniques should be used to locate, document and recover the footwear evidences. Full and partial impressions must be recovered and the scene should be secured and evidence should be collected properly. Usually the evidences are found on the entry of a door. Different footwears evidences should be collected differently and different evidences should be marked number, giving number 3, 4, 5, etc. whatever number is being there. So an evidence in a soft mud, which is a 3D evidence, can be collected firstly using photography, and after the photography these evidence can be collected using plaster of Paris. So very clear impression shows the perfect lines which are on the base of the shoe, and the same can be collected from the suspect to match which is present at the crime scene, and the same shoe evidence can be taken from the suspect, and all the lines should be matched properly to look for the nicks and ticks, to look for the any, if there is any individual marking, wear or tear present in the shoe. Now after the location and recovery of footwear evidences, the electrostatic lifting, which is an aggressive technique to recover impression normally on tile, wood, etc. This is a very good technique for recovering impression from the tile, wood, such surfaces. Electrostatic lifting helps us in collecting the evidence if there is any mud pattern present there. Various markers should be used to document the locations as we have discussed before, because there are chances that the presence of the persons on the crime scene might hinder the evidence at the crime scene. So it is very essential that proper marking should be done. No one should destroy these evidences. So if possible, we should remove and transport these impressions. The quality photographs should be taken of impressions if they cannot be transported, and photographs are taken for later comparison with suspected footwear, therefore they must be very clear. Scale should be used to gauge size of footprint. Whenever we are taking the photograph of any footwear impression, a scale should be kept alongside to know what is the size of that footwear impression, so that we can comment on the shoe size of the person, which will tell us about the height of the person. Now, two-dimensional impressions or the 2D impression, which are being photographed first, and the print may be lifted using electrostatic lifting transfers, and in some cases fingerprint powder in combination with microsoil may be used on impression where electrostatic lifting does not work. So, with footwear impression, we can use the fingerprint powder, which are used for the collection of fingerprints, lip prints, etc. With the combination of microsoil, we can say, and we can develop a print or develop a latent footwear impression, which can then be photographed or which can then be tape lifted. So this is an impression which was developed using the blacking, the fingerprint powder, and we can see various wear and tear in the between. For the 3D impression, as we spoke about, the dental stone or POP is primary method of casting footwear impressions. There could be either wet surfaces or the dry surfaces. On wet surfaces, a spray wax may have to be used first to seal impression. Mix dental stone with water in a Ziploc bag for 3 minutes and stone hardens in 20 minutes. In 24 to 48 hours, it will have fully hardened impression. So, from the footprint, the photograph which is being taken, then we can put the mixture of POP, and through which it can be, this impression can then be recovered and can be sent to the forensic science lab. The enhancement methods for the poor impression is the forensic photography. Oblique, ultraviolet, infrared or other special methods should be used. For physical methods, latent powder, lifting impressions or impressions on paper can be used. Chemical methods are the reagents such as leucocrystal violet, amido 10 black, luminol or fuchsin acid may be used. Digital methods, software such as Adobe Photoshop can be used to enhance the impressions. There could be latent prints on the clothes of a person, which can be further developed using the fingerprint powder with the mixing of microsoil or directly fingerprint powder, and this impression, either this cloth on which the impression is being formed is directly sent to the forensic science lab, or it can be photographed and this photograph is being sent to the forensic science lab. These were the evidences which were collected from the crime scene. For the matching of these evidences, we should need evidence from the suspect. So, known shoes and preparation of exemplars. Footwear from suspected persons. All footwear a suspect owns should be seized for comparison. Shoes are needed to make test impressions. Footwear worn by police officers, medical personnel should be accounted for when considering impressions left at the scene. So, we should eliminate all the footwears which are being worn by the police officers or the medical personnel who were present at the crime scene, or any other family member who was there at the crime scene. Those should be eliminated to provide any false negative matching. And for the known test impression, examiner will make impressions of known footwear and compare them with suspected footwear impressions to ensure matching samples are highly detailed and have individual characteristic of the shoes. So, in the whenever we are collecting or taking photographs, we can see nicks and ticks in the photographs, which will help us in identifying, like near the round surface we can see some individual marking which can help in the identification of that footwear evidences. The examination process and conclusions include the area of footwear which are examined by analysts include design of shoe, physical size and shape, wear marks, individual identifying characteristics such as cut, star, gum, etc. So, just by looking at the design of shoe, the physical size and shape of the shoe, the various wear and tear marks which are present, these wear and tear marks helps in the individual identification and certain characteristics which we were talking about, the various cuts, any tar, any gum which is present on the base of the shoe, that can be used for knowing the individual identification. So, as we can say, the design of shoe might be same for two different persons wearing the same brand and the same shoe size, but while analyzing this evidence, we should keep in mind that the individual characteristics such as various cuts, various nicks and tucks mark, or maybe sometimes it may happen that the shoe may undergo repair. So, there are some external repair marks which are present on the back side of the shoe that can also be used for the forensic investigators to look for uh, any individual mark which is different from the back pattern which is present in the original brand shoe should be looked after, because those are the individual markings which will help us in the identification or for individualistic impressions of such persons. So, to conclude, I will say that all these impression evidences which are found at the crime scene, they are unique and individualized form of forensic evidences, and their use in the area is very widespread. Whenever we are talking about the footwear evidence or shoe evidence as an individualistic evidence, it is really helpful for a person, for a forensic scientist or for a forensic investigator to identify a person using a shoe evidence. So, keeping in mind all the individual characteristics which we can get from the shoe evidence should be taken and should be proceed with the forensic shoe evidence for the identification of the person. Thank you.